What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to SMITE Meta Casual News. In today's episode, SMITE comes to the Xbox One. Don't check your calendars, it's not April. We talk about some of the pros, some of the cons, what this means to SMITE high-res, the players, as well as the existing PC players. All that and a little bit more. Once again, my name is FG3000, you're you, and here comes the news. In today's news, we learned that SMITE is coming to the Xbox One. This is arguably the biggest news to come out of SMITE since the game was announced. So this is absolutely massive. But before we talk about my opinions and predictions, let's talk about the facts as we know them today. So of course we know that SMITE is coming to the Xbox One. We also know that the servers will not be shared. So if you're an Xbox One player, you will not be going against PC players. That has already been confirmed from high-res. Now, as far as what else we know about this, we don't know when the game is slated to release. It's basically coming soon, so it's anybody's guess. But what about you PlayStation 4 players out there? So we do know that this is not a console exclusive to Xbox One. It's just going to arrive on Xbox One first. So you can probably imagine that Microsoft struck out a deal with high-res to release it on the Xbox One first. That way they can build up this console MOBA market before PlayStation 4 even has a chance to react, which they really don't have a chance to react. There are no other high-profile 3D MOBA games in existence that can work on a console. So this is a huge untapped market that, at the end of the day, this is a huge win for Microsoft. Now, I'm going to use a term called system seller, and when I say that this game is a system seller for Xbox, it definitely is. Now, how many that's going to be, it's not going to be millions, but I'm sure there is a huge market out there that is just waiting for a game like this to arrive free to play on an Xbox One. This is just massive, and if things work out the way that high-res obviously hopes that they work out, this won't be the end. You'll see it on PlayStation 4 next. So from a business perspective for Microsoft and high-res, this is a deal that has zero downside and limitless upside. No one knows how many Xbox players out there really want a MOBA. You have to imagine that when they think of MOBA, they think of League of Legends and think of Dota 2. And automatically you would have to imagine that their mind kind of turns off, because you don't want to play League of Legends or Dota 2 on a console. Like it's just not designed. It just will not work on a console. So there's an untapped market out there of people that don't know that they want a MOBA. So we don't really know how big this market is. However, once they see a game like SMITE in a third-person view, where you can use an Xbox controller pretty comfortably playing this game. And of course, I'm sure high-res is going to make a few different changes to make it even more controller friendly. But the fact that people can already use the controller and play at a pretty decent level is just one less thing that high-res really has to worry about. Not to mention that the architecture between the PC and the Xbox One is so similar. Now, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that due to the fact that the control schemes can work pretty much day one, obviously they're going to make some provisions to make it work even better. Also, given the fact that the architecture between the Xbox One and the PC is so similar, I would be willing to go on the record and say that this port is probably pretty far along, and I would not be surprised if you see this game come out on the Xbox One before the end of the year. Before 2014 is over, I would have to imagine that this game will be available for you to play on the Xbox One. That is my prediction, and that's all the facts. Now let's talk about some of my opinions, some of the community's opinions, pros, cons, all that good stuff. So if you go to Reddit and take a look at kind of what's being said there, the opinions are pretty much all over the place. Now let's start off with some of the cons here. Actually, let's just go back and forth. So one con that I see pretty much repeated over and over is high-res. Why are you working on this Xbox One port when there are matchmaking issues and there are server issues? We've obviously had some downtime these last few days. So let me come out and say my opinion on that. When it comes to server issues, the only way to really avoid them is to play a game that is not online. So at the end of the day, no matter how long SMITE is out, no matter how many resources they pour into minimizing server issues, there will be server issues. World of Warcraft is a great example. This game makes billions of dollars. It's been online for what, 8, 9, 10 years? I'm not sure how long World of Warcraft has been online, and they still have unexpected downtime. They still have days where the servers go down. They still have lag and rubber band issues. It happens because it's an online game. So using server issues as a con of why Hi-Rez shouldn't be working on extra projects, in my opinion, it's a weak argument. Because there are going to be server issues no matter how hard they work on server issues, right? It's just a fact. As long as they try their best to minimize the amount of server issues, as long as when you play Smite, 99% of the time it works. And I have to kind of speak for a lot of people because I know a lot of people that play this game. 99% of the time when they press the play button, Smite works. Smite works at a way that is comfortable for them to play at a high level, and that is the best that you can expect. If it was the inverse of that, if there were truly 99% of the time when you logged on, the game was unbearable to play, then 99% of the people would not be here. They wouldn't even be playing Smite. So I understand there are server issues. I understand there are exceptions to everything. I understand that some weeks are better than others. I understand all that. But this is going to be a tug of war that Hi-Rez will continue to work on throughout the life of the game for years to come. That is not a good reason to reject an Xbox One version. Now, so the very next thing is matchmaking. Now, this is probably the most common complaint that I hear so far. And to be honest, these things don't have anything to do with each other. But the complaint is, why make an Xbox One version when you still have matchmaking issues? Fix the matchmaking issues first, then work on an Xbox One version. Before I even talk about the matchmaking, let's talk about that famous phrase, why did you work on this when you should have been working on that? This has nothing to even do with Smite anymore. This has been around since games have been able to be patched online. There's somebody out there on a forum or on Reddit that always brings up that argument, why did you work on this instead of that? And to be honest, it is a really poor argument. Any company worth its weight doesn't just work on one issue at a time. That's just how it is. That's not how companies thrive. And what I'm about to say next, people always think it's an excuse, but it's not an excuse, it's reality. The art department can't help you with your matchmaking issues. They can't help you with your server issues. Customer service can't help you. The people that are making God concepts can't help you. Marketing can't help you. None of these people can help you with the issues that are IT specific. They just can't help you. Now, the side argument is this. Well, instead of hiring people for the Xbox One version, they should have been hiring people to fix the matchmaking and to fix the server issues. And my response to that is, how do you know they didn't? How do you know they didn't hire people to fix the server issues and the matchmaking issues as well as the Xbox One port? This goes back to the point that I made earlier in the video. Hi-Rez is perfectly capable of working on multiple issues at the same time. Now, there is a really corny analogy, but it really holds true. And that corny analogy is this. If you have one person in a kitchen baking a cake, it's going to go pretty slow. Now, you add 3 or 4 people in that same kitchen, that's going to speed up things quite considerably. Now, you add 40 people in that same size kitchen, chances are that cake is not going to be fixed any faster. In fact, you might even have more issues than if you would have had a smaller team. Now, but with all that being said, Hi-Rez has already announced that there are some massive matchmaking fixes coming in the next few patches, including the removal of rolling queues. So matchmaking, once again, is not a good enough reason not to have an Xbox port. It's not a good enough reason to delay getting your product out to 4 million new potential players that do not have any other option but to play your game if they want to play a MOBA. That is massive. So those 2 reasons, matchmaking and server issues, in my opinion, they just don't hold weight. Now, I don't want this to sound like I'm taking Hi-Rez's back on every single issue. There are some cons that I actually agree with. One con is, what is this going to do with the timeliness of patches, right? If they're going to try to keep the Xbox and the PC on the same exact patch schedule, does this mean that we're not going to get slower patches? Does this mean that if something needs to be hotfixed quickly, are they going to be able to hotfix them quickly now? Because now you have to make sure that your Xbox version and your PC version are running the same version. So in my opinion, that is a legit con. Like, that's actually pretty scary. So if you want to talk about a con that actually affects us in a real way, that is a con. Matchmaking, server issues, balance, to me, those are all emotional responses. These are things that are going to be looked at for years to come, no matter what they're doing. Like, they're always going to be looking at balancing. There's always going to be people looking at matchmaking. There's always going to be a focus on those things, regardless of whatever else happens. So that's my take on that. Now let's talk about some of the good news. Let's talk about some of the pros. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video, 4 million players. That is the current installed base of the Xbox One. None of these players have access to a real, legit AAA MOBA. SMITE to the rescue. Now, the entire time SMITE has been out, they've had to basically battle with League of Legends and Dota 2, two games that are arguably way ahead of SMITE. Now, SMITE is the #3 MOBA in the world, but when it comes to #1 and #2, they are so far ahead of SMITE, it's crazy. And SMITE has only been able to do a couple of things. They've been able to say, okay, if you're tired of League of Legends and you're tired of Dota 2, come play SMITE. Or if you're used to 3D controls and MOBA or MMO style controls, come play SMITE. But that's pretty much it. So they're kind of like, you know, I hate to use this word, but they're kind of like the bottom feeder of the MOBA world, right? Now they have an installed base of 4 million players that they are the primary option, right? Dota and League of Legends cannot come and play with SMITE now because their control scheme, their top-down clickety click 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 scheme just does not translate well on a controller. It just doesn't. This is why you don't really see a lot of RTS games on console, just because it just doesn't work. Now, there are a few different nuances that I am a little worried about. Like, let's take, for example, Hebo's 3, his water spout. To me, that seems like it'll be a pretty difficult move to use on a controller. Now, when you think about third-person games, the way they handle an ability like a water spout for Hebo, you have to think about grenades, right? When you think about grenades in those games, you have this little arc that you kind of pull back and you can arc towards a direction. It's kind of hard for me to explain, but if you've played any console games and third-person shooter games and you've thrown a grenade before, you know that little arc that I'm talking about. That's how they handle an ability like water spout on consoles. Now, that ability is slow. How do you handle that in such a fast-paced game like SMITE? Now, this brings up another con for me, and that con is this. Okay, Hi-Res says, you know what? Hebo's 3 is pretty difficult to aim on a controller. Now, do we now change Hebo's 3 to not be difficult for a controller user to use? Or even more scary, when they're designing new gods, do they say, okay, let's design this god, but make sure he doesn't have any abilities that are hard for Xbox users to use? That waters down the PC version. So these are the type of cons that I want people to think about, not these, you know, matchmaking servers and balance and items and all these things have zero impact on the Xbox version, in my opinion. Of course, leave your comments in the section below and I'll definitely take a look at it, but I want people to kind of think outside the box when it comes to the type of cons. You know, the patch schedule, some of the abilities. Will this water down future gods and future modes because they don't work well on the Xbox version, even though they would work perfectly on a keyboard mouse PC version, right? Or what about things like the 10 versus 10 mode that we've never seen? Did they scrap the 10 versus 10 version because it really wouldn't work on an Xbox One very well due to system limitations? Like, and I'm sure there are other considerations that I haven't even thought about when it comes to keeping the Xbox version and the PC version in sync and true to the original design goals of Hi-Res. So that's gonna wrap up my thoughts in the Xbox news. My final personal thoughts are this. I am super excited to be able to share a hobby that I've been playing for years, a game that I'm very close to a potential 4 million new players. I can't wait to see a sea of brand new Twitch players streaming from their Xboxes, YouTubers. I mean, I can't wait to see SMITE back in the reviews again, back in the message boards and the comment sections, which is kind of scary at the same time. This is huge for SMITE. So Hi-Res, very good job. This is a really smart move. I can't wait to see how this pans out, in my opinion, later this year. Write it down. It's gonna be out later this year. But that's gonna do it for SMITE Meta Casual News once again. My name is FT3000. You have been you. And that, my friends, was the news. this. It's all good.
Follow me. Follow me.
Set up an ambush here.
My bolts will strike with great fear.
Oops. Be careful. Oops.
Okay.
Be right back.
Bye. I should keep well stocked. On my way.
Dang it, not gonna make it.
Blast
Your
it all.
siege juggernaut has been destroyed.
Lightning bolt.
Be careful.
On my way.
Follow me.
Hi. Okay. Okay.
Set up an ambush
Follow me.
here.
Bye. Attack the Titan. I'll attack the Titan.
On my way.
I'll attack the Titan. Bye. Let the heavens rain. Bye. Bye.
That's how we attack the Titan.